Discover the incredible truth behind the surprising final moments of Marie Antoinette's execution. Clara's heart raced as she flipped through the yellowed pages of the diary, her fingers trembling against the rough edges. The words leaped at her, hushed whispers of a life lost to the weight of expectation. Marie Antoinette, the infamous queen, had penned her last thoughts of despair, betrayal, and an insatiable longing for loyalty. How could one woman seem so real yet feel so far away? The incessant drumming of raindrops against the bookstore window mirrored Clara's growing anxiety, each drop amplifying the echoes of doubt she tried to silence. As a 31-year-old history professor with a familial legacy of educators looming over her like a specter, she often felt like a ghost drifting through the ivy-covered halls of her university. Accolades flowed to her peers while Clara toiled away unnoticed, her groundbreaking research languishing in the shadows of unspoken fears. What if I fail? The thought clung to her, a desperate plea that sent chills racing through her body. Layers of her ancestry pressed down like a heavy cloak stitched from the fabric of her family's expectations, making her feel small and unworthy. Even the damp, musty scent of the antique bookstore failed to distract from the internal chaos threatening to erupt. Her mentor, once a beacon of inspiration, had dismissed Clara's work outright, rendering her both unseen and unheard in a faculty meeting where she had sought support. The word still stung at Lack's merit like a physical blow, leaving her gasping for air. How could she rise from this? She imagined presenting her findings at the upcoming conference, her resume already burdened by the weight of her family name. But with every thought came a new wave of skepticism crashing through her mind, spiraling like a never-ending tempest. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Clara pressed the diary to her chest, reveling in the sense of camaraderie she felt with Marie. Here was a woman navigating a world that was set against her, her poignant reflections mirroring Clara's own struggles of longing to be heard while bound by her lineage. As she read about the Queen's last moments, a horrifying parallel formed in her mind. Would her own desperate cries for recognition be silenced, much like Marie's cries for justice? The fear twisted inside her, coiling tighter with each passing day, threatening to consume her like shadows during dusk. With the conference looming, Clara grappled with disillusionment and the undeniable realization that her aspirations could either bind her or liberate her. As her internal storm raged on, uncertainty draped over her shoulders like a suffocating mask. Would she confront her fears, amplifying her voice, or would she simply fade into the background, an echo of another woman's silent story? The clock was ticking, and Clara could feel the impending pressure closing in, poised to either crush her or ignite a fire deep within. Where would she find the courage to rise, not just for herself but for the countless women like Marie who were condemned to the pages of history? Clara took a deep breath, her fingers still dancing over the diary's pages before she refocused on the reality of her situation. She could feel the warmth of the title resting in her mind. Discover the incredible truth. Perhaps, that was what she needed to do, discover not just the truth of Marie's fate but the truths buried deep within her own psyche. She placed the diary down, its words still swirling in her thoughts, as she stepped toward her reflection in a nearby mirror. The unfiltered image of herself stared back, punctuated by dark circles beneath her eyes. For too long, she had allowed the shadows of self-doubt and pressure to consume her. It was time to reclaim her narrative. In that moment, a question ignited within her: what if I dared to share my voice? Walking in a trance-like state through the quiet streets after leaving the bookstore, Clara felt each step resonate with the cadence of newfound determination. The rain had ceased, leaving a soft mist that hung in the air, refreshing yet invigorating. She pictured Marie Antoinette, standing alone before her executioners, unfurling her thoughts on the blank pages of that diary. Could she channel that same brave spirit? Clara respected the historical impacts of her predecessors like Marie but felt tired of letting their shadows eclipse her potential. She recalled the conference, the faces of eminent historians, the intoxicating blend of anxiety and excitement buzzing in her chest. The next day she would finalize her application. No longer would she cower beneath her lineage. Back in the confines of her apartment, surrounded by books that smelled of memory, Clara decided to delve deeper into her research. She reached for her notes, meticulously crafted arguments scattered across several drafts. The strengths of her findings sat there, waiting for her to bring them to life. The fear that had once rendered her frozen now shimmered like a guiding star. What if she executed her presentation with the same depth of confidence as the monarch who had spoken her final truths? As she stirred her passion into a vision, a sense of authority blossomed within her. Clara realized that she possessed a unique perspective that demanded to be heard, one echoing the complexities of lineage and the pressures it imposed. She'd bypass mere historical recounting, she'd intertwine her experiences with those of Marie, exploring the relentless pursuit of identity layered beneath expectation. Days passed quickly as Clara began sketching an outline, fervently weaving together her ideas in a narrative that felt alive. Two women from contrasting eras bound by the struggle for agency. Every sentence empowered her, every discovery igniting her spirit. The pressure she once loathed began transforming into anticipation. She could unearth the truth that lay not only in history's pages but within her heart. But as she molded her presentation, a familiar doubt gnawed at the edges of her newfound confidence. Just as she had made strides, the thought crept in: would her mentor dismiss her work again? She felt precarious, balancing on the cusp of creativity and self-sabotage. The previous dismissal reverberated ominously in her mind, daring her to abandon hope. Yet, a growing determination surged forth. She resolved to seek feedback from fellow faculty members, determined that this time, she'd stand firmly in her convictions. Her strength would rise not only from her research but also from the willingness to confront her fears head-on. As Clara prepared to step into the tumultuous arena of academic scrutiny, she could almost feel Marie's fierce spirit at her side. There was something exhilarating about facing uncertainty, a raw power born from vulnerability. She dived into the preparations, eyes sharpened with focus. The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, Clara found herself teetering on the edge of her professional and personal evolution. Would she embrace this momentum and expose herself to the potential for rejection, or would she falter under the weight of fear? The clock was ticking, and the time had come to face the ramifications of her choices. What awaited her next was an intense confrontation that could either validate her journey or send her spiraling back into obscurity. Clara stared at her laptop, the blinking cursor a haunting reminder of her doubts. The outline of her presentation glimmered in the digital haze, filled with ideas that seemed more like fragile whispers than solid arguments. Each eerie silence grew louder, pressing down, a looming weight that threatened her burgeoning confidence. She pivoted in her chair, scanning the apartment that had been her sanctuary. Books lined the walls, each a fortress of knowledge, yet somehow they suddenly felt like tombstones of unfulfilled potential. As she pulled a few papers toward her, the notes fluttered reminders of her devotion to the subject and the stakes that felt higher with every passing minute. Gazing at the headline of her draft, "Discover the Truth Beneath the Crown," she fought against the tide pulling her into the depths of self-doubt. What if her research lacked validity? What if her comparisons between herself and Marie defied what truly resonated? With a surge of resolve, she picked up the phone, her fingers hovering over the contact list. Would it be foolish to reach out for feedback? Her heart raced. Clarifying her thoughts through discussion would suggest vulnerability, a risk she had to take. With a deep breath, she dialed Sarah, a colleague she respected. The ringing echoed in her chest until Sarah's voice broke through. "Hey, Clara. What's up?" Clara felt an unexpected warmth envelop her at Sarah's sincerity. "I need your honest opinion on a project I'm working on. Can I come by?" "Absolutely. I'd love to help." Clara hung up, the quiet of her apartment replaced by a surge of energy. The anticipation of sharing her struggles ignited a spark within her. Just the thought of opening up her research had transformed a prison of doubt into a platform for collaboration. Upon arriving at Sarah's cozy office, Clara immediately felt the atmosphere shift. Books cluttered the desk, photographs framed with joy surrounded them, and there was an air of support. Laying down her notes, she began explaining her narrative. Two women, separated by time yet united through shared struggles. As she spoke, the words flowed with an ease she hadn't previously experienced. Sarah listened intently, offering small nods that reaffirmed Clara's conviction. "This is powerful, Clara," she encouraged. "You're bridging a gap that needs understanding in our field. You're not just recounting history, you're engaging with it. This connection you're making, it resonates." Clara's heart soared momentarily, but just as quickly, unease crept back in. What if I'm not equipped to take this stage? What if I present it and my mentor finds it lacking? What if stop? Sarah's validation cut through Clara's spiraling thoughts. Every academic faces doubt, even when they're accomplished. The only thing that really matters is your passion. You're showing that. Don't qualify it by thinking of what others might expect. Just focus on your truth. Her words clung to Clara like a lifeline. This was an opportunity to embrace her uniqueness, not a moment to shrink under the pressure of expectation. Reflection began to wash over Clara like a gentle tide. The feedback had unlocked something powerful. She just needed to trust herself. After hours of collaborative refinement, Clara felt empowered, her earlier fears muted beneath layers of newfound confidence. Perhaps she could embrace the uncertainty instead of shying away from it. She arrived home later that night, a renewed fire illuminating her thoughts. With the conference looming, she felt the weight of both elation and anxiety intertwine. Clara sat down at her desk once more, determined to create an impactful conclusion that would leave her audience questioning the very essence of their understanding of history. Yet, shadows lingered. She recalled her mentor's harsh feedback, the feeling of inadequacy when she had shared her dreams before. How would her mentor react now? This confrontation loomed, a test of her evolution. The clock ticked, with it, the risks loomed like specters. Was she really ready to confront the person who had the power to uplift or unravel her? With a deep breath, Clara turned back to her laptop, anticipation tinged with dread as she typed the heading, "The Truth of Knowing Oneself." In that moment, the stakes had never felt higher, leaving Clara mindful of the distance yet to traverse in both her journey and her understanding of her own voice. What awaited her in the moments that would follow could either cement her place here or send her spiraling into those old, familiar doubts. As dawn broke, Clara awoke with an intensity that mirrored the light creeping through her window. The conference was now only days away, and her thoughts churned with both excitement and anguish. There was no escaping the confrontation with her mentor looming on the horizon like a storm. Would he recognize the evolution in her work? Would he dismiss it as mere folly? Pushing through the mental fog, she ventured to her desk, where her notes lay scattered like pieces of a puzzle. An unopened envelope from her mentor rested beside them, a reminder of the email that had stung her confidence. Resolving to address it today, she picked up the pen, her grip tightening instinctively. Writing had always brought her clarity, she needed to articulate her trepidation and her ambition. "Dear Professor," she began, shaky but determined. Each flick of her pen felt like an act of defiance, an assertion that she was no longer the uncertain student he had once known. The words flowed, expressing her newfound understanding of Marie Antoinette not just as a subject of analysis but as a figure filled with complexities, much like herself. Marie's life, filled with misunderstanding and misrepresentation, resonates deeply with me. She fought to articulate her own narrative. I want to do the same, to connect her experience with modern implications. She paused, allowing the fervor of her argument to sink in. I hope to present this perspective at the upcoming conference. I value your feedback, as always. With a sense of finality, she sealed the envelope. There was no turning back now, she had taken the first step in asserting her professionalism. The act itself invigorated her, washing over her with a liberating warmth. Clara felt the cords of intimidation loosening their grip. After finishing her morning routine, Clara headed to the university library. Surrounded by ancient texts, a respite from her tech-dominated daily life, she hoped to delve deeper into her subject. As she navigated the labyrinth of shelves, she felt a sense of purpose guiding her, research consumed her, and hours flew by. Relaying Marie's final moments became a meticulous and passionate act of creation. However, as she pieced together the narrative, a troubling thought gnawed at her: what if her interpretation was not enough? Again, she could almost hear her mentor's voice, the familiar blend of constructive criticism and pointed skepticism. Would her insights withstand scrutiny? Drawing in a deep breath, Clara moved away from the books, seeking solace in a nearby window. Watching students bustle along the campus with fervor, she recognized that they, too, grappled with their own uncertainties. Perhaps sharing her story could help them find their footing, just as she was attempting to do. Determined, she returned to her notes and crafted the structure of her presentation. Layer by layer, she infused her unique voice and perspective into her research. The words finally felt powerful, not just the echo of someone striving to please. Clara realized that for all her anxieties, this platform could be her moment, a chance to challenge norms and provoke thought. The day sped by, though Clara barely registered passing time. As evening approached, she stood poised at the precipice of her journey, reviewing her presentation one last time. Suddenly, a notification flashed on her phone. Her mentor had replied. The anxiety started to creep in, yet something else mixed with it: a resolve. This reply would determine the next path of her professional life. As she gingerly opened the message, her heart raced, filled with anticipation. Had she prepared herself for what might come next? Would his words bolster her confidence or plunge her back into self-doubt? With trembling hands, she read the first line: Clara, your interpretation intrigues me. The rest remained hidden beneath the weight of uncertainty. Clara braced herself as she continued reading, heart pounding against her ribs, eyes darting back and forth across the screen. However, the message continued, trailing into a realm of caution. She felt a rush of heat wash over her. There it was, the familiar sting of critique. She was tempted to read only the praise, to grasp at those words like life rafts, but the allure of understanding compelled her to forge ahead into the depths of his thoughts. However, I believe your interpretation lacks a comparative context that could enrich your analysis. The words twisted in her stomach. Her resolve to assert herself met the harsh reality of professional scrutiny. She needed to engage fully with this feedback, not merely as an obstacle, but as an opportunity for growth. Clara forged a path to transformation through feedback. Her mind began racing. What meaningful comparisons could bolster her analysis? She wasn't merely piecing together a historical narrative, she was sculpting a deeper understanding of a complex woman who lived under the palpable weight of societal expectation. She rushed back to her books, adrenaline pumping. She pulled texts on other historical figures, women who had faced similar misinterpretations, those whose legacies had transformed in the light of new interpretations. She flipped through pages filled with debates about power, autonomy, and gender dynamics. There, among the established theories, Clara found parallels to Marie that sparked inspiration. This was more than a revision, it was a revolt against the condescending voice that had long echoed in her mind. The comparisons flourished, sowing seeds of growth in her intellect. With each connection she drew, confidence surged through her, feeding her determination. Clara was not simply studying Marie Antoinette, she was confronting the prevailing narratives that sought to render women's stories subservient and simplified. As the evening deepened, illuminated by the pale glow of her desk lamp, she tapped into her findings with renewed fervor. Clara transcribed her thoughts, weaving newfound insights into her presentation with powerful resonance. The narrative of Marie's last moments transformed, painting a picture filled with tension and unresolved desire, her figure not merely a martyr but a woman echoing a struggle that was still relevant today. Completing her revisions felt like a cathartic release, like throwing open a window in a stuffy room. She stood and stretched, her body imbued with energy, but it wasn't just physical, it was a sense of purpose igniting her spirit. She pulled away from her desk, letting the evening air wash over her face, refreshing, cleansing. But doubt still lingered like a shadow in the corners of her mind. Would this new perspective resonate with her mentor? Would she uncover something he had missed when evaluating her work? The conference loomed like an impending wave, its swell both thrilling and terrifying. Clara understood that she was on the brink of a personal breakthrough. This was not only about defending her work, it was about advocating for an evolution in the very fabric of historical storytelling. As she prepared for bed, exhaustion began to creep in, but with it came clarity. Clara realized she was not preparing just for a professional presentation, she was prepared to confront biases, to allow her voice to become part of a larger discourse. With firm determination, she whispered her resolve into the dark, "I will be heard." The following day would bring the ultimate test of her preparation. Little did she know, a surprise awaited her from her mentor that could either revitalize her courage or shatter it entirely. Deep breath in, hold, tomorrow would shape everything. Clara woke before the sun fully breached the horizon, a sense of anticipation stirring her from sleep. She sat up in bed, the weight of the conference looming large in her mind. Her heart raced as she thought about the potential encounter with her mentor, expecting both validation and critique in equal measure. The goal she had set for herself was clear: to present her findings passionately and assertively while fully owning her newly formed perspective. In the quiet of the early morning, Clara sat at her desk, reviewing the notes she had crafted the night before. Each line pulsated with her dedication and newfound insights. This was her chance not just to speak about Marie Antoinette, but to reclaim a narrative that had been so often misrepresented. The profound implications of the themes she had drawn in were echoed in her own life. What did it mean to assert herself in a man's world? Clara had felt the struggle of being heard, the constant desire to prove that she could stand alongside her male peers while bearing the heavier societal burdens. This was her moment to confront the biases that had previously held her back, and she was determined to use this opportunity to communicate the strength inherent in vulnerability. As she arrived at the venue, a familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety twisted in her stomach. The lobby bustled with scholars and students alike, all exchanging thoughts and ideas, competing for attention. Clara stood amidst the crowd, taking deep breaths to steady herself. The electric energy around her sparked an idea: perhaps she could create a more engaging presence by utilizing her storytelling skills. She envisioned her words flowing effortlessly, drawing her audience in with the dramatic retelling of Marie's final moments. When her mentor finally approached, her heart sank as he assessed her with a steely gaze. The surprise she had anticipated flickered in his eyes, mixed with a certain apprehension. He began speaking, outlining his own thoughts on her analysis, and Clara braced herself, prepared for critique. "While I see your commitment in this revision," he began, "there are elements I believe could still benefit from a tighter focus. Your ideas on societal expectation are compelling, but how do they connect back to your primary argument about Marie's autonomy?" For a moment, Clara fought back against frustration. She felt the urge to defend her position, yet she also recognized an opportunity for dialogue. Instead of retreating into her defensiveness, she chose to articulate her perspective. "I see Marie not only as a victim of circumstance but as a woman navigating through oppressive expectations. Her choices reflect not weakness but a complexity that resonates with women today." Her mentor regarded her with newfound attention, the skepticism fading slightly. His voice softened as he replied, "That's a strong perspective, Clara. Maybe you're onto something. Explore it, push it further." His encouragement revived her earlier determination. Perhaps, for the first time, she felt he recognized her not just as a student needing guidance, but as a colleague worthy of intellectual discourse. The conversation morphed into an engaging back and forth, and Clara found herself more animated than in previous discussions. With each response she received, pieces of clarity began to fall into place, not just regarding her presentation, but about her identity as a scholar. She was not merely recounting historical events, she was weaving a narrative that bridged the past with the present, showcasing the struggles of women through time. As the conversation drifted towards the start of her presentation, Clara felt the tension shift in her favor. She tightened her grip on her notes, ready to embrace her moment. But would it be enough? Would her advocacy resonate as she had hoped? With the audience gathering, Clara stood at the podium, taking in the sea of faces. The energy shifted from anxiety to a palpable current of belief in her voice. Could she truly redefine how Marie Antoinette's story was told? The time had come to face the audience and challenge their preconceived notions. As Clara began, she felt a surge of courage flow through her, invigorating her words. The question remained, how far would she push her narrative, and what truths lay waiting to emerge from the shadows of history? Clara felt the weight of silence enveloping her as she stepped forward and cleared her throat. The anticipation in the room was palpable, a collective breath held hostage by the promise of revelations hidden within her presentation. This was not simply a retelling of Marie Antoinette's demise, it was an exploration of the complexities of womanhood in the face of societal expectations. She took a deep breath, allowing the thrill of adrenaline to guide her voice. As she spoke, her words flowed like a river carving through stone. The imagery of Marie's life played out vividly in her mind, and she painted that picture for her audience. Clara described the ornate court of Versailles, with its gilded mirrors and whispers of betrayal dancing through the air. She juxtaposed the opulence of the monarchy with the stark desperation faced by women in her own life, drawing parallels that ignited interest within her listeners. Marie, Clara said, was not merely a queen dragged to her fate, she was a woman trapped in a web spun by privilege and power, the very constructs that confined her. Her narrative is shaped not only by her actions but by the expectations thrust upon her. The audience leaned in, and for the first time, Clara felt as if she were not competing for attention but rather inviting them into a conversation. The way she articulated Marie's struggles mirrored her own, transforming vulnerability into strength. With each passing moment, her voice gained confidence, vibrancy. She was no longer just a scholar presenting research, she was a storyteller, a woman asserting her voice in a dialogue long dominated by others. As she navigated through Marie's story, Clara sensed her mentor's gaze from across the room. He appeared captivated, nodding slightly at her poignant connections. His presence buoyed her morale, reinforcing her belief that she was, at last, being heard. However, a flicker of doubt began to set in as she neared the crux of her presentation. Would she dare name the power dynamics that had silenced women like Marie? Would it come across as too controversial? No more half measures, Clara thought, her internal resolve emerging with a fierceness that silenced the doubts. Speaking from her core, she articulated the critical moment of Marie's trial, framing it as the embodiment of judgment against all women who dared to defy societal norms. She offered no apologies, merely a passionate plea for recognition of the complex interplay of strength and survival. As she reached the culmination of her argument, the room was electric, eyes alive with the realization of what she was presenting. The narrative she crafted was not just a historical account, it was a rallying cry. The space between the past and present was no longer a chasm but a bridge she was building with each passionate articulation, with her final phrase echoing in the hall. A moment of silence stretched. Clara had shared her heart, her fight, and her understanding of what empowerment truly looked like. Abruptly, the air filled with applause, and Clara's heart raced, not solely from the recognition but the realization she had transcended mere academia, she had engaged in a powerful discourse about identity, history, and justice. Yet, as she stepped back from the podium, heart still pounding, thoughts racing, she wondered whether she had done enough. The applause faded, yet doubt crept back in. Had her message resonated? Were individuals in the audience reflecting on their own narratives? As she caught her mentor's gaze, he appeared thoughtful, a myriad of questions forming behind his eyes. The exchange that followed could either establish her as a peer or return her to the shadows of doubt. Clara's thoughts whirled. Could a single presentation solidify her emerging identity as a scholar, or was it merely the beginning of a much longer challenge ahead? The moment of truth was not just in the presentation itself, but in the dialogues it would inspire. What revelations lay beyond this encounter? What truths about herself would she uncover through the responses she eagerly anticipated? Clara stood poised on the brink of her transformation, uncertain yet exhilarated, ready to delve deeper into her own evolving narrative. Clara stepped off the podium, her body still tingling from the rush of sharing her voice. Yet amidst that exhilaration, the daunting reality of what came next loomed over her like a storm cloud, heavy and foreboding. The applause echoed in her ears, but it was the silence that followed that pressed down on her. What had she sparked? She navigated through the crowd, faces blurring together as she sought her mentor's familiar outline. Would he approach her brimming with praise, or would he critique her boldness? She needed the affirmation of his wisdom, the steady hand she relied upon during her academic journey. Or was it time for him to let go, to thrust her into a world where she relied on her own judgments? As she reached him, his expression was inscrutable. He clasped his hands together, and for a moment, she thought he might be gathering his thoughts. The space felt charged, as if the air itself held its breath alongside her. "That was compelling, Clara," he started, his voice measured, each word placed with care. "You've made connections that resonate well beyond just historical context. But tell me, what do you really want to accomplish with this?" The question hung there, waiting for her to delve deep, to confront what lay beneath the surface. It was easy to talk of Marie's plight, to paint her as a symbol of strength, but Clara felt defensive as she considered the implications behind her presentation. "I want people to see that we are still facing similar battles today," she replied, her voice resolute. "I want us to question norms that have governed women for centuries." He nodded slowly, yet the skepticism in his eyes twinkled. "And how far are you willing to push this narrative? There are those in your field who may not appreciate your perspective, particularly those who hold fast to tradition." A surge of defiance surged within her. Clara realized this exchange was more than a mentor and men discussing ideas. It was a challenge to her very identity as an emerging scholar. Could she endure the backlash that may stem from her unflinching honesty? "I can't be afraid of criticism if I want to break boundaries," she asserted, voice steady despite the underlying tremors. "Good," he said, though the tone of his acceptance was cautious. "But remember that growth frequently hurts. You may need to navigate spaces that aren't ready for your perspective, and that's okay. It's part of becoming a true scholar." In that moment, Clara's apprehension transformed into a resonating conviction. She felt like an alchemist, a creator of her destiny, manifesting a path teeming with potential. Yet, lurking beneath that excitement was the haunting notion of isolation. She would challenge the norms, but at what cost? Would this commitment lead her to estrangement in her academic circle, or, perhaps worse, silence her voice entirely? With every heartbeat, Clara absorbed the enormity of what lay ahead. Her previous doubts about whether she had done enough began to morph into questions about whether she was ready to take on this mantle of purpose. She needed evidence of growth beyond this singular moment, an evolution fueled by her own truths. As her thoughts spiraled, Clara fixed her gaze on the doors that led outside, light flooding through. What awaited her there? Would members of the audience approach her with questions, perhaps even challenges? The path of her transformation was no longer marked merely by presentations but by the continuous dialogues they inspired, the shared moments that would test her resolve. Taking a deep breath, Clara took a step toward the door, toward what was next. The fear of judgment transformed into a pressure to engage with those who might resist her ideas. The thought of confronting that challenge fired her spirit. The time had come to face her detractors head-on, but she also realized she had to remain open to unexpected allies. With her mind racing, she pushed through the doors, a mixture of excitement and dread coursing through her as she turned back for one last look at the room where she had shed her hesitations. What conversations would await her outside? Would she embrace the battles ahead with the courage she'd found within her presentation? Clara squared her shoulders. The world was waiting, and she was ready to dive deep. But was she prepared for the consequences that lay just beyond this threshold? Once outside, Clara was struck by the vibrant cacophony of ideas colliding in the air. The world seemed untouched by the intensity of her internal battles, and as she stepped further into the thrumming crowd, she was acutely aware of the weight she now carried. She had declared her stance, but the looming uncertainty of response left her vulnerable. A few audience members clustered together, pointing toward Clara, eyes wide with curiosity and intrigue. She took a moment to collect herself, the sun warming her skin yet providing little comfort against the chilling prospect of dissent. What if they viewed her as a radical? Her heartbeat quickened as she approached the group. "Hey, Clara! You were amazing!" A voice rang out, a fellow academic whose opinions Clara valued. "Josephine. Her enthusiasm seemed infectious. Your talk about Marie was thought-provoking. I'd love to hear more about how you see her struggle reflected today. Clara felt a rush of relief at the acknowledgement. Josephine's eagerness was a welcome antidote to her earlier fears, and for the first time, she allowed herself to see her courage reflected back through someone else's eyes. Thank you, Josephine, Clara replied, her voice less shaky now. I think we can draw parallels to the pressures women face in their professional lives, still fighting for equal recognition. As the conversation unfolded, Clara found her footing, diving deeper into her research, articulating the nuances of Marie's story. Each word she spoke wove her unprecedented experience into the fabric of their dialogue. This was what she craved, the exchange of ideas where she could be unapologetically herself without the confines of tradition, but not everyone welcomed her perspective. From the fringes, a stern-faced professor, one known for championing conservatism in the field, edged closer. One cannot simply impose modern interpretations onto historical figures, he interrupted, his tone laced with condescension. Your analysis lacks rigor and context. Clara's heart sank at the confrontation, but she stood firm. In the face of this antagonism, she could sense her conviction solidifying. That's precisely the point, Professor. History is not stagnant and should reflect our evolving narratives. Surely, it's worth examining how historical ideologies still permeate our lives, she countered, her voice carrying an assertiveness she hadn't known she possessed. His gaze narrowed, as if weighing her words against the grains of his control. She could feel the tension between them building, a wildfire threatening to erupt. Yet, Clara sensed something else simmering deep inside her, an ember of defiance pushing her to dismantle the very boundaries this professor embodied. Respectfully, Clara continued, inquiry demands that we question what we accept as concrete truths. After all, if we look away from the lessons of history, we effectively erase the struggle that comes with progress. A silence fell over the gathering, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze. Clara's heart raced as she dared to meet the professor's unyielding gaze. Would he rebut her insights, or had she planted a seed of doubt within him? With every growing moment, she realized the importance of using her voice. This encounter was a convoluted dance of power and persuasion, one that could either galvanize or alienate her. She could no longer hide behind the shield of caution. Her journey was about challenging systems and unwavering contexts. As the discussion unfolded around her, heavier and deeper, Clara caught snippets of interest from others observing, a few nodding at her words while others looked uncomfortable. The battle was palpable not only with the professor but within her. Had she made her stance clear without losing herself? As the dialogue progressed, Clara began to see fragments of potential allies emerging from unexpected places. But just as she began to entertain that hope, her mentor's words echoed in her mind. Was she truly prepared for the repercussions that could arrive with her newfound openness? Was this just the beginning of a much larger confrontation? The sun began to set, casting long shadows on the pavement, and through that light, Clara recognized the choices she faced. She could retreat back into the safety of silence, or she could dive fully into this turbulent discourse. Feeling the weight of the moment, Clara prepared to confront whatever opposition awaited her. But the next challenge loomed ominously around the corner, and a question lingered, threatening to tilt her resolve toward an unexpected direction. Would she be able to navigate the treacherous waters of academia while staying true to her beliefs? In the aftermath of her compelling presentation, Clara stood amidst the vibrant mix of her peers, her thoughts still racing from the adrenaline of speaking out. The apprehension that had lingered throughout her academic journey felt almost foreign now. Bolstered by clarity, she was determined to embrace each person in her sphere with candor and authenticity. Conversations swirled around her, and as attendees approached with questions and comments, she felt the weight of her earlier fears fade into the background. Clara, your insights on Marie's autonomy are striking, a colleague named Tom said, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I hadn't considered the enduring implications of her story on our current societal narratives. Clara's heart swelled with gratitude, realizing that the fear of scrutiny had merely been an obstacle to overcome. Each positive dialogue nurtured her confidence, reinforcing her growth into an engaged scholar. As the discussions continued, she felt emboldened to challenge assumptions she had once been hesitant to confront. Clara addressed the concerns raised by the conservative professor, articulating the importance of relevance in historical analysis. The past is a living dialogue, she asserted, woven into the fabric of our present. It deserves to be re-examined through the lens of contemporary discourse. Clara's passion resonated with the more progressive attendees, who nodded knowingly, recognizing themselves in her words. Days turned into weeks, and the ripple effects of her presentation began to unfold. Clara received not only positive feedback from her peers but also an unexpected request to collaborate on a journal article exploring themes of feminism through history. The invitation felt monumental. She was no longer an unseen scholar hidden behind her family's legacy, but a recognized voice in her field. With every commitment she accepted, Clara proved to herself that she possessed the credibility to redefine her academic identity. The crowning moment came as she prepared to submit an abstract for a symposium next semester. Instead of feeling inferior due to the towering presence of her family's esteemed history, she revamped her narrative with newfound authority. Clara wasn't just another reflection of her lineage. She was writing her own chapter in history, one where her voice mattered, where her perspective could shift paradigms. Returning to that same mirror she had once confronted, Clara admired the person staring back. Her reflection no longer cast shadows of doubt but radiated confidence, the dark circles under her eyes replaced with bright determination. She remembered the diary of Marie Antoinette, how the Queen's struggle for autonomy resonated deeply within her, urging Clara to rise against the entrenched expectations of her environment. The moment came when she found herself in a faculty meeting, discussing important changes within the history department. As her peers debated various strategies, Clara raised her hand with assuredness. We cannot overlook the evolving narratives of women in history. It's imperative we create an inclusive framework for our curriculum, she declared, her voice steady and decisive. The room fell silent, her colleagues surprised by her fervor, but Clara pressed forward, infusing her passion into every argument, securing her place at the table. Receiving encouraging nods from her fellow faculty members felt monumental. Clara had navigated the once feared terrain, asserting herself with clarity and conviction. What began as stifling anxiety transformed into an empowering dialogue of influence. Validation came not just in positive feedback but resonated within her own heart, echoing, "I belong here." Months later, Clara stepped into a lecture hall, packed with students eager to hear the story she had so passionately crafted. Her presentation had far surpassed the boundaries of her research. It intertwined her personal experiences with the historical narrative of Marie Antoinette, a tale that now spurred others toward self-advocacy. She stood taller, exuding an energy. Fueled by those who had come before her, ready to inspire the next generation yet again. As she concluded with a powerful call to action, insisting the students must reclaim and share their narratives, Clara felt tears prick at her eyes, not of despair, but of profound fulfillment. She had conquered her professional fears, discovered her voice, and cultivated a legacy that transcended her family's shadows. In that moment, she recognized her transformation. A scholar once weighed down by expectations had emerged as a beacon of empowerment. Clara knew her journey was just beginning, but it was now illuminated by an unwavering confidence. With every story she shared moving forward, she invited others to see their worth and proclaim their truths, creating a tapestry of voices destined to resonate through time. You need to subscribe now to be part of this transformative journey and not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, it really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about Clara's evolution and the impact of her journey. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second, because true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the power of support in this community.